Hey y'all, Dave Isaacs here. Wanted to give a quick lesson today about movable chords. This is something that came up in one of my classes yesterday, and it was an idea that was new to almost everybody, and I thought this is a really good thing to explore. It opens up so many possibilities to you, just a whole bunch of brand new sounds that you might not have had under your fingers yesterday. So the basic idea is that any chord that we can play in open position can be played somewhere else. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to work everywhere, but I can take a D chord, say, and if I just move that up 2 frets, this actually forms an E chord, these 3 notes. So that's just the 3 notes that I'm holding. Now, if I play that against the open strings, you notice there's a level of clash to that, because this formation that creates the D chord has moved up evenly, meaning that all 3 notes have been raised the same distance. But when you strum a D chord, we also have this open string, and then when I move this, out of 4 notes, 3 have moved but 1 hasn't. So that can clash. You wouldn't actually want to start here, but it can be a cool sound too. If I keep moving, say for example if I move this form up to the 7th fret, that sounds real nice. Keep in mind, this operates with the same principle as bar chords. As you move along the neck, you're just taking a chord and moving it up the scale so that it's essentially being built on a different note, the next highest note of the scale. So this makes a D. If I go up 2 frets, it becomes an E. 2 more frets, it becomes an F. I'm sorry, 1 more fret, it becomes an F. So 2nd fret D, 4th fret E, 5th fret F, and then 2 more frets, 7th fret G, 9th fret A. And I'm referring to the fret that my index and middle fingers are on. So when you play a regular familiar open position D chord, I'm calling this the 2nd fret because of where pointer and middle are sitting. D, up 2 to F, I'm sorry, D, up 2 to E, up 1 to F, up 2 to G, up 2 to A. Now you notice if I play all of those with a repeated D string, sounds pretty good. I'm using something we call a drone, which is when you have a repeated bass note, or even just a repeated note, doesn't have to be in the bass, but one note that doesn't change while everything else does. And I still have to choose my spots. I have to choose where I'm going to land. But listen to this note against the chords. Your ear is interpreting every chord relative to D. And what ends up happening is that we're not hearing D chord, E chord, F chord, G chord. We're hearing a melody that's been harmonized in 3 parts. Now, those are the best sounding combinations against that D, especially the 7th fret, because the D note here is actually in the chord. So this really does create a G chord if we're just hitting 4 strings. And you may have heard things like this before. this, to quote a Traveling Wilburys song. And it can get moved around too, without even returning to D. There's a section in the middle of Led Zeppelin's Over the Hills and Far Away that does this. Just taking that D form and sliding it. You can also to be appropriate to the style. That chord isn't going to sound right in certain places, but it does sound right in others. I can play the beginning of the Beatles' 8 Days a Week just by taking that form. 2nd fret, 4th fret, 7th fret. Now, continuing on with the concept of a drone, what the guitar part actually is in that song is this form. So you can see it a little better. That's the very opening of the song. The shape, 3 fingers, 3 adjacent strings, 3 adjacent frets. It's like an F. I'm just not playing the bar. I'm doing this. 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, and if I strum that with the open E string, I get an F major 7th. Nice sound. If I move that up 2 frets, I get a G6 because the E note makes a 6th, but it also, again, just gives us that drone note, that repeating note that makes us hear the chord in a different way. 2 more frets, I get an A, and in that case, the note where my pointer finger is matches that open string. Now in the case of the Beatles song, if I take this same 3-finger shape, again I'll move so you can see, move up to the 10th fret, so I'm on 10, 11, and 12 on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. Now when I strum 4 strings, I get that open E. This makes a D add 9. Very nice, rich sound. I move up 2 frets, D part becomes E, which of course blends with the E note. Now I move up 3 frets to a G form, or a G chord, I should say. We're still hearing that ringing E, which, like I said, is a G6, but we're not worrying about that. We're just thinking D, E, G, D. And with that E string ringing, it just creates this nice atmosphere, this nice sound to it. I want to give you one other example of this. An E chord works beautifully for this. And we end up with 3 ringing strings, but check this out. Plain old cowboy E chord, right? Again, if I slide it up, E, 1 fret to F. This sounds like a bullfight. Right? Here's E, here's F, up 2 is G, up 2 more is A, up 2 more is B. So let's say I have something that's A's, E's, and B's. I can just slide this E form to E, B. Now, of course, it's not the same as if I just played the major chords. It's got such a nice atmosphere to it. Now, of course, it all depends on the context. In that particular example, that E string, if you're going to sit on that B chord, you might find that that clashes, but at the same time, it gives you a lot of what you need. And I can give you an example of another classic rock song that uses exactly this. I Can See for Miles by The Who is taking this E chord up to the 4th fret, and the 6th. This is a G form. I'm sorry, a G chord. E, F, G. I should clarify that when I say form, really what I ought to be referring to, and what I usually am referring to, is the shape. So we might call this an E form, but it creates a G chord when I'm in this position. So form is the shape, chord is the sound. I've misspoken a couple of times, so I wanted to clarify that. E, moved up 3 frets gives me a G, and 2 more frets gives me an A, and the Who song I Can See for Miles goes like this. Now, you may or may not be writing music or playing music that fits those sounds. It might not be appropriate for what you're doing. But just that thought that you can take anything you can play down here and slide it up and down the neck, and while everything isn't going to work, there are going to be spots where you land that sound really cool. Sometimes because the notes you're fingering are matching the notes of the open strings that are still ringing, and sometimes because the blend of the open string note that isn't in the chord with the notes that you're holding that are in the chord makes an interesting sound. So something like this is a good example. If we want a G chord, this note isn't part of it, but it sounds good. In the case of this A, the E note is in the chord, but the B isn't. It's a great sound. So I hope that's useful. I hope that's something fun for you to play with. D shape, F shape, E shape. This is Dave Isaacs from NashvilleGuitarGuru.com. Thanks for watching.